There is a sound Mara Voss has heard every night for 11 years, and it is not a scream. It is smaller than that. Quieter. It is the sound of a 6-year-old girl exhaling water from her lungs one last time. A wet, rattling breath that Mara has never told a single living soul she can still hear. Because how do you explain that a sound can live inside your skull like a tenant who never pays rent and never leaves? Tonight, for the first time in 11 years, she hears it come from the bathroom down the hall. And the bathroom door is locked from the inside. Mara was 19 the summer her sister Ellie drowned. She was supposed to be watching her. That is the sentence that is organized every year since. Not Ellie died. Not there was an accident. But Mara was supposed to be watching her. She has said it in therapy. She has said it to 3 different men she almost married. She has never once said it to her mother, because her mother has never once needed her to. Her mother's silence has always said it for her. Now Mara is 30. She has moved back into the house. Her mother's house, the lake house. The house with the dock still bolted to the shore because nobody has ever been able to bring themselves to tear it down. Her mother is dying. Ovarian cancer, stage 4. 6 weeks if she's lucky, the doctors say, though nobody in this family has ever agreed on what luck means. Mara tells herself she came back to take care of her mother. That's true. It is also not the whole truth. And Mara has spent 11 years getting very good at holding 2 truths at once without looking directly at either. The first night, she doesn't sleep. She lies in her childhood bedroom listening to the house breathe. Old houses do that, settling creak, and she tells herself that's all it is. But at 3:14 a.m., she hears humming. A child's humming, tuneless and happy, drifting up through the floorboards from the direction of the dock. She goes to the window. The dock is empty. The lake is flat and black and gives back nothing, not even the moon. She almost convinces herself she dreamed it. Almost, until she comes downstairs the next morning and finds a small, wet handprint on the hallway mirror. Child-sized. At exactly the height Ellie would have reached, if Ellie had ever gotten the chance to grow past 6. Mara's mother, propped up in her hospital bed in what used to be the dining room, watches her daughter freeze in front of that mirror and says, without being asked, in a voice sanded down by morphine and 30 years of grief, "She's been trying to talk to you since you left, Mara Bear. I just don't think you were ready to let her." Mara wants to ask her mother what she means. She wants to ask 100 things she has spent 11 years too afraid to ask. Instead, she wipes the handprint away with her sleeve, and says nothing, because saying nothing is the family trait, passed down like a bad heirloom. That night, the humming comes again. Closer this time. From just outside her bedroom door. And when Mara finally works up the courage to open that door, what she sees standing in the hallway is not a 6-year-old girl at all. It's herself. 19 years old again, soaking wet, exactly as she looked the day she came running up from the dock screaming for help that came 4 minutes too late. And the version of her in the hallway smiles. Here is the thing about seeing a ghost of yourself. There is no version of that experience where you get to stay calm. Mara doesn't scream. She doesn't run. She simply stops breathing for what feels like an hour, but is probably 4 seconds, and in that gap of nowhere, the 19-year-old girl in the hallway, soaked, shivering, eyes wide with a horror Mara remembers wearing on her own face, opens her mouth and says the exact words Mara said to the 911 dispatcher 11 years ago. "I looked away for 1 second. I only looked away for 1 second. Then she's gone. Not faded, not vanished in a puff of horror movie smoke. Just gone, the way a word disappears the moment you stop thinking it. Mara doesn't sleep again that night. She sits on the bathroom floor with the door locked, knees to her chest, and does the thing she has trained herself never to do. She lets herself actually remember that day. She remembers Ellie begging to go in the water. She remembers her own phone buzzing, a boy she liked, a stupid text about a party, and she remembers the 4, maybe 5 seconds she spent looking down at that screen instead of at the lake. She remembers looking up, and the water being still. Too still. She remembers diving in fully clothed. She remembers Ellie's hair, dark and floating, before she even found the rest of her. She has never told anyone about the phone. Not the police. Not her mother. Not the therapists. In every version of the story she has ever told, she was simply distracted. The phone is the one detail she has buried so deep that some mornings she can almost convince herself it isn't true. In the morning, hollow-eyed, she finds her mother awake early, staring out at the lake with an expression Mara can't read. "I found your old phone," her mother says quietly. "The flip phone from that summer. In a box in the garage I was finally sorting through. I charged it up last night, just to see." Mara's stomach drops through the floor. "There's a text on it," her mother continues, voice steady in the terrifying way that only comes right before something breaks. "Said right at 3:47 that afternoon. You never told the police what time you looked away, honey. But the coroner's report said Ellie went under sometime between 3:40 and 3:50. The silence that follows is the loudest sound Mara has ever heard. "I'm not angry," her mother says. And somehow, that's so much worse than if she were. "I just need you to stop lying to yourself before I die, Mara. Because I don't think she can rest until you do. And I don't think you can either." Mara flees the house. She drives to the edge of town with no destination, and it's only when she pulls over, hand shaking on the wheel, that she notices the humming has followed her. It's coming from the back seat. She turns around slowly. The back seat is empty. But the child-sized handprint is there again, this time pressed against the inside of the passenger window, fingers splayed, as if something small had been trying, for 11 years, to get out. Grief does strange arithmetic. It can make 11 years feel like 11 minutes, and it can make a single afternoon stretch out long enough to swallow an entire life. Mara has always assumed her mother's grief looked like hers, silent, buried, structured around one unbearable sentence. She is about to learn she was wrong about almost everything. She drives back to the lake house because she doesn't know where else the ghosts of her life would let her go. Her mother is waiting for her on the porch, wrapped in blankets despite the summer heat, an oxygen tube looped under her nose, looking somehow more alive than Mara has seen her look in months. "I need to tell you something I should have told you 11 years ago," her mother says. What follows is not the confession Mara expects. Her mother tells her that Ellie wasn't supposed to be near the water that day at all, that Ellie had been having night terrors for weeks before she died, waking up screaming about the cold place, about the lady under the dock, that their mother had taken her to a doctor who called it ordinary childhood anxiety, that their mother had, God forgive her, stopped listening to a 6-year-old's fear because 6-year-olds are always afraid of something. "I've spent 11 years blaming your 4 seconds," her mother says, and her voice cracks open like ice in spring. "But I had weeks. I had a child telling me something was wrong with that water, and I told her she was being silly. If there's blame to go around in this family, Mara Bear, you inherited about 1/10 of what actually belongs to me." Mara sits with this, stunned, the ground of her entire adult identity shifting under her. She has organized her whole life around being the girl who killed her sister with 4 seconds of inattention. She has never once considered that this story was incomplete, that the person who has punished her most cruelly for 11 years was never her mother, or fate, or a ghost. It was her. That night, for the first time since she arrived, Mara sleeps in the room that used to be Ellie's. She doesn't know why she does it. Maybe because she finally wants to stop running from the one room in the house she's avoided completely. She wakes at 3:47 a.m., the exact minute from the text message, to find Ellie's old nightlight, unplugged for over a decade, glowing softly in the corner. And sitting cross-legged on the floor beneath it, humming, is a small girl in a yellow sundress. This time, Mara doesn't look away. "Ellie?" she whispers. The girl looks up. Her eyes are wrong, too old, too knowing, for a 6-year-old's face. And she says something that stops Mara's heart cold. Mama already knows what's really under the dock. She's just been too scared to go look. Are you scared too, Mara? There is a particular kind of terror that doesn't come from monsters. It comes from realizing that the people who raised you have been keeping a door closed your entire life, and you have just been handed the key. Mara doesn't sleep after that. She sits with the impossible girl until the light through the curtains turns gray, and somewhere around dawn, the girl simply isn't there anymore. No fading, no drama, just an empty patch of floor and a night light that's somehow warm to the touch, like it had been burning for hours. She finds her mother at the kitchen table, too weak now to manage the stairs, staring at a cup of tea she isn't drinking. "What's under the dock?" Mara asks, her mother's hand still. The story that comes out over the next hour is one Mara has never heard. Not in 11 years of half-truths and careful silences. Before this was their family's lake house. It belonged to Mara's grandmother, and before that, in the 1970s, it belonged to a family named Kessler. The Kesslers had a daughter, 7 years old, who drowned off that same dock in 1974. There were rumors, her mother says quietly, that it wasn't an accident, that the girl's own mother, deep in an undiagnosed postpartum psychosis nobody had language for back then, had held her daughter under the water herself, then told everyone the child had simply wandered off and fallen in. "Your grandmother bought this place for almost nothing," her mother says, "because nobody local would touch it. She always said the lake felt unsettled near the dock. I thought that was superstition. I told myself that for 30 years. And then Ellie started having those nightmares about the cold place and the lady under the dock, and I told myself that was superstition too. Because if it wasn't, if a 6-year-old could somehow sense something real down there, then I'd have to admit I let my daughter swim every single day of her life in water I already suspected wasn't safe." Mara feels something in her chest crack open. Not new grief, but old grief finally finding room to breathe. "You didn't kill Ellie," her mother says, finally looking her daughter in the eye after 11 years of not quite managing it. "I didn't kill Ellie. I think something in that water has been taking what it wants for 50 years, and it took her, and it has been trying to keep her here with it ever since, using her, using us, using our guilt as the rope it pulls on. That's what the humming is. That's what the handprints are. Ellie's not haunting you, baby. I think Ellie's trapped, and I think she's been trying to warn you the same way she tried to warn me." Outside, the humming starts again, but this time it isn't coming from the house. It's coming from the lake. Mara walks to the window. Standing on the dock in the pale morning light are two small figures now. Not one. Ellie in her yellow sundress, and beside her, a second girl in old-fashioned 1970s clothing, water-dark hair plastered to a face that has been rotting gently in that lake for 50 years. Both girls turn to look up at the house at exactly the same moment. Both of them are smiling at Mara's mother. Mara has spent 11 years afraid of a memory. She is about to spend one night afraid of something with an actual pulse, or the drowned, waterlogged absence of one. Her mother, impossibly, insists on going down to the dock. Mara begs her not to. She's too weak. It's not safe. None of this is a good idea. But her mother has the specific, terrifying calm of a woman who has already made peace with dying and has decided this is how she wants to spend whatever days she has left. "I've been scared of that water for 11 years, she says, gripping Mara's arm as they walk down together, oxygen tank rattling on its little wheels across the grass. "I am not going to die still scared of it." At the end of the dock, the two small girls are waiting. Up close, the Kessler girl is worse than either of them was prepared for. Not a special effects monster, just deeply, quietly wrong. The wrongness of something that has been alone in cold water for half a century. Her eyes, when she finally lifts them to meet Mara's, are full of something that isn't malice at all. It's loneliness. Bottomless, ancient loneliness. "She's not trying to hurt you," Ellie says, and her small voice carries a weight it never should have to carry. "She's just so tired of being the only one down there. She didn't mean to keep me. She just didn't want to be alone anymore, and I looked like I might stay." Mara's mother sinks to her knees at the edge of the dock, and for the first time in 11 years, she says her younger daughter's name without her voice breaking on the first syllable. "Ellie, baby, I am so sorry I didn't listen to you." "I know, Mama." Ellie's smile is impossibly gentle for a ghost. "I forgave you a long time ago. I think that's the only reason I've been able to stay long enough to say goodbye at all." Mara steps forward, every instinct screaming at her to run, and instead kneels beside her mother. "What do we do?" she asks. "How do we let her go?" The Kessler girl speaks then for the first time, a voice like water moving over stone, ancient and small at once. "Someone has to remember me. Not be scared of me. Just remember. Nobody has said my name out loud in 50 years. Mara's mother, who has spent 3 decades ignoring the rumors her own mother told her, closes her eyes and says it. A name pulled from 50-year-old memory, from stories she was told once at a kitchen table and tried for 30 years to forget. "Annie. Your name was Annie Kessler." The water around the dock goes suddenly, impossibly still. Stiller than water has any right to be, like the entire lake has just exhaled for the first time in half a century. And Ellie turns to Mara with an expression that is no longer a 6-year-old's at all. It's ancient and sad, and it says, without a single word, "It worked, but it isn't over, because now it's my turn to ask you for something, and you might not like what it is." There is a moment in every act of love that looks, from the outside, exactly like an act of loss. This is the story of that moment. Ellie's request, when it finally comes, is not a horror movie bargain. It is something far simpler and far harder. "I don't want you to be scared of the water anymore," she tells Mara. "I don't want that to be my last gift to you, making you afraid for the rest of your life. Annie held on to me because I was scared, and scared things are so much easier to hold onto than brave ones. I need you to go in. Just once. Not to save me. You already did everything you could that day with what a 19-year-old girl knew how to do. I need you to go in so the last memory this water has of you isn't a rescue that failed. I wanted to remember you swimming. Just swimming. Like we used to." Mara stands at the edge of the dock for a long, long moment. Behind her, her mother, dying, oxygen tank humming quietly beside her, tears running freely down a face that has been composed and careful for 11 years, nods once. "Go on, Mara Bear," she whispers. "I'll be right here." Mara takes off her shoes. She walks to the end of the dock. And she jumps. The water that closes over her head is cold, but it is only cold. Lake cold, ordinary cold, not the wrongness she has feared in her dreams for over a decade. She opens her eyes underwater, and, for just a moment, she sees them both, Ellie and Annie, hand in hand, growing fainter with every second, like light finally reaching the surface after being trapped in the deep for far too long. Ellie smiles at her one last time. Then there is only water, and Mara, and the specific, ordinary miracle of being alive. She surfaces gasping, laughing and sobbing at the same time in a way that doesn't require those two things to make sense together. On the dock, her mother is smiling, really smiling, for what might be the first time since Mara came home. Epilogue. Mara's mother dies 6 weeks later, exactly as the doctors predicted, in her own bed, looking out at a lake that has never once made another sound in the night since that morning on the dock. Mara doesn't move away afterward. She stays. She fixes the dock instead of tearing it down, and some mornings, she swims before the sun is even fully up, and it is never anything but ordinary, cold, forgiving water. She still thinks about the 4 seconds sometimes. She probably always will. But she has stopped believing those 4 seconds are the whole story of who she is. At her mother's funeral, an elderly woman Mara doesn't recognize approaches her, a distant Kessler relative, tracked down through an old newspaper archive Mara had spent weeks searching. The woman is holding a faded photograph, a little girl in 1970s clothing, gap-toothed, laughing, utterly ordinary, utterly alive, 70 years before anyone would think to be afraid of her. "Annie," Mara says softly, and something in her chest finally, fully unclenches. Her name was Annie. The woman smiles, and for just a moment, just one moment, in broad daylight, nothing frightening about it at all, Mara swears she can smell lake water and summer grass, and hear, very faintly, very far away, the sound of 2 little girls, laughing,